Welcome to today's episode of the Psychedelic Mom podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Carlin. And today I have an incredibly deep, interesting conversation about the use of 5-MeO DMT for healing sexual trauma. And I'm so grateful to be here today with Victoria Wueschner, who is the co-founder of F.I.V.E. and really put together this beautiful retreat. I don't know that there's another one like it on the planet that serves 5-MeO DMT specifically for survivors of sexual trauma. And we have Dr. Holly Richmond on, who is a somatic psychotherapist, licensed sexual trauma therapist, and who met Victoria. So I'm looking forward to hearing how they connected. And we also have Deanne, who is a survivor, a mother, a grandmother, a nurse, many titles for who you are. And you are here today because you went through this journey with Victoria and Dr. Richmond. So we're going to hear from you. But I'd like to open it up, Holly, with you as the psychotherapist who's here, who works with patients and clients and women and men with sexual trauma, about how you got here and the work that you're doing, and then how you met Victoria and how this retreat emerged.
Yeah, Michaela, thank you so much for having all of us, but I feel so honored to be here. Just very quick backstory with me. I did most of my 3,000 hours of internship at the Santa Barbara Rape Crisis Center. And I learned quite quickly that I was taught very well how to treat sexual trauma, but there was this wall where I didn't know how to treat the what comes next. And that what comes next was really helping survivors have good sex and healthy relationships. So I wrote my dissertation on the recovery of sexual health after sexual assault. And about 11 years later, translated that into my latest book, Reclaiming Pleasure, that really looks at all of those constructs. So yes, it's moving through trauma, but how do we embrace our sexuality and have healthy relationships? Victoria was connected to me through another client. And I remember Victoria and her partner, Joelle, reached out and said, hey, we'd love for you to record a 4-hour course for us on treating sexual trauma. Here's what we do. And I wrote back and I said, oh my gosh, what you do is so amazing. I'm so interested, but you have the wrong person. I'm just beginning my journey with psychedelics. So thank you, but I don't know enough. And they wrote me back and then they said, you do know enough. You're the expert in this space. Just record the video for our integration specialists so they know what to look for when they see sexual trauma and some ways of treating it. So I recorded the course. Victoria and Joelle were so gracious and generous and invited me down to Tandava last fall. I experienced the medicine for myself. Victoria and I just had a love affair right away. And we started brainstorming for this retreat for women. And that just happened last month.
Wow, incredible, really incredible. One of the things I'm going to be interested in hearing about, and Victoria, you'll probably be speaking to that as someone who holds medicine space, ways to identify someone who's experienced a psychedelic experience when there's sexual trauma, how to be trauma informed, how to address the issue when it comes up in ceremony, when a memory actually comes up. So there's so many topics around the use of psychedelics and often repressed memories. As we know, psychedelics can amplify something that's already there and highlight something that's been hidden for a really long time. So Victoria, I want to welcome you and the work that you do there at Tandava. For people that do not know Tandava and your work, I'd love you to talk a little bit about what you're doing there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. Deep, deep honor to be here with all of you, especially talking about something that's so close to all of our hearts. And my work. So Tandava Retreats, I'm actually here at the center right now. Here in Tepoztlán, Mexico, we have many different retreats that we hold specifically working with 5-MeO DMT. We've got retreats that are specific for people who are working through things like trauma and PTSD. We've got more expansive retreats for psychonauts and people who are more on the explorative side. And then we have special retreats. We had one with Dr. Holly that was a couples retreat. Obviously, we're here talking about the sexual trauma retreat, and we have other special retreats like that. So that's kind of what we're doing on the retreat side of things. But we also have another company, our sister company called F.I.V.E, which stands for 5-MeO DMT Information and Vital Education. And this is essentially a resource hub that's free for the community on 5-MeO DMT. As so many people know, the 5-MeO DMT community and space is a little bit wild. There's a lot going on out there. And so we felt that there was a pretty profound need for education in the space. And so it's actually FIVE-MEO.education for anybody who's curious to learn about 5. And this goes for anybody who's brand new and wants to sit for the first time, to avid psychonauts, and even people who are facilitators who want to learn more. So we've got, over 30 pages of free information. We've got integration specialists who specialize in 5-MeO DMT, and actually webinars. There's free webinars every month with different expert guests. And then we have a training program. So we actually train facilitators, where we just opened up for our 2024 cohort. We take up to 15 students only, and we've brought in over 35 guest teachers and speakers alongside myself and my partner Joelle to teach these facilitators, Holly being one of them, as we are trauma-informed in our training. And essentially it's 8.5 months that are done online, and then 2 weeks here on site for an experiential portion. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Thank you for the work that you do. 5 is an incredibly powerful medicine to serve and to hold space for. So for anybody listening that doesn't know what 5-MeO DMT is, would you like to speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely, yes. So 5-MeO DMT, there's different forms that 5-MeO DMT come in. It's found in nature in different seeds, for example, also in the Sonoran desert toad. It has some glands that produces 5-MeO DMT along with a dozen other tryptamines and alkaloids. This is one of the more popular forms of 5-MeO DMT, but it's also synthesized in a laboratory as well. That's pure 5-MeO DMT without those additional tryptamines and alkaloids. And actually in the Sonoran desert secretion, the active alkaloid is 5-MeO anyway. So what we're really wanting to work with is 5-MeO DMT. And so there's, many reasons why we're working with the pure molecule itself. One is for conservation reasons. With the popularity of 5-MeO, the toads are just facing so much, and it's really devastating. Mm-hmm. So that's a big key point for us, as well as safety. So when it comes to the bufo secretion, you never actually know how much you're giving somebody. There can be anywhere from 10 to 30% 5-MeO DMT in it. So, it's funny because no matter what secretion you're weighing, it's actually, even with the world's most accurate scale, you can never know how much you're actually giving someone. And for a facilitator, that's a really large margin of error. Also, additionally, some of those tryptamines and alkaloids are cardiotoxic. And so we never want to push a participant into, if somebody has an underlying heart condition or something like that, push them into cardiac arrest. So this is the compound that we work with, and why we work with it is profound. It has a nickname of the God molecule. And, the reason that it has that nickname is it's known as being an ego dissolver. That in the peak experience, there can be a full shutdown of the default mode network, which is our space of our brain that is responsible for giving us the individual sense of the I or the self. So you can imagine that if you have that full shutdown where you are no longer experiencing yourself as your traumas and your stories, but instead you're experiencing yourself as your true totality. What a liberating moment that can be, to know that we're so much more than we thought that we were, and then to be able to come back into the body in this little human suit and integrate that. It can produce really, really profound shifts in people's perspectives of life. And then on top of that, I think I think it's important to also state here, because there's a lot of information with 5-MeO-DMT that you need to reach that space, that everybody that does 5-MeO needs to have an ego death and merge with the Godhead. But there is such profound healing in the lower dose thresholds where there is still a sense of I that is present, and we're still in that mystical state. And I would say specifically for trauma survivors, that's where we've gotten a lot of our healing.
Interesting. So more micro to low dose, where the ego is still able to be in control. Yeah.
To a degree.
I also want to say, I always find it, to a degree, exactly. I also like to add, too, that 5-MeO-DMT is one of the only psychedelics that is endogenous to our bodies, which is fascinating to me. And that we can have experiences from bliss to terrifying ego death sometimes. There's a wide range of experiences with 5-MeO-DMT, and which is just another reason to have incredibly resourced and well-educated, supportive people holding space if you ever do consider doing this medicine. It's one of the ones I would say even more so than maybe some of the other medicines. But Deanne, thank you so much for being here. You went down to Tandava twice, actually. And so you had two different experiences there. But I'd like to first invite you to tell a little bit about your story and what brought you to this work.
Thank you. So growing up, I don't have any memory of being under the age of 11 years old. And while that was a little disturbing, it didn't really shake me too much. And I was going about my life the best I could, surviving. When my middle daughter was in second grade, on her way home from school one day, she told me that Grampy does things to her that she doesn't like. And I came to find out that she had watched a movie at school called Good Touch, Bad Touch. And if my understanding is it's a fairly innocuous video, but if you have been abused, it'll speak to you. And so in the middle of that video, she began crying, and they took her to the guidance counselor where she was able to talk a little bit about what had been happening for her. That set in motion some revolutions for me, an understanding of what my life has actually been like. Through that process, some very caring people were able to help me come to understanding that I possibly had been abused myself, got me in touch with a good therapist, and I started doing that work. And it made sense to me. Things fell in line. And so I continued forward. Everything was moving, having come to an understanding that my father had raped me as well. Don't have any memory of the events themselves, flashes of things, senses of things in my body. I've had kind of chronic abdominal pains and things like that throughout my body that I just assumed, it was in my head, there's something wrong with me, those types of things, because there wasn't any physical things, but assumed I was fine. My father goes to prison. My daughter was a rock and was there, testified in court, did all the things. She took back a lot of what was taken from her. About 2.5, 3 years ago, I was raped by someone that I trusted. My world fell apart. My sense of safety for me shifted into this space that I'm only safe because people allow it to be so. My words don't matter. I can't fight. And I wasn't able to really continue with any sort of a functional life. Thankfully, Holly came into my life. As I started doing all of that and working, things got a little better. Unfortunately, it was a time when there was a storm in the area. Power went out, and I went to leave my neighborhood, and the gate wouldn't open. And I had what I can only describe as what they depict in the movies as a PTSD flashback. I was on my back, shoulders pressed against me. I could feel his facial hair and his breath. I couldn't move forward. I was kind of stuck. And right about that time, I think was when Holly was actually meeting Victoria and going down to the retreat center. So after a little bit of time, she just offered for me to think about it. What would going down to Tandava and using 5-MeO, would that be something that would speak to me? After, it didn't even take very long, I think it was a few days, I just knew in my chest, knew in my core that that was the next step for me. I ended up going approximately a month later and met Victoria and Joelle. It was, that experience for me there was a must do. It was something that I felt like I had reached a limit for me then, and I couldn't see a way forward. I didn't know how I could continue to live. My experience with the medicine was amazing. I was both scared and the bravest I've ever been, all at the same time. And it was such an honor to sit there and be with Victoria and Joelle, and also my integration specialist, Otto, held space for me as well. My first experience with the medicine, I did a lower dose and asked for more. I don't know what compelled me to ask for more when I came back from that, but that's where I was. And so I went right back in and drifted into that space beyond myself. And I came back and I was able to touch some of that thing, like you had talked about 5-MeO, kind of shining a light on things that we don't actually are able to see ourselves. I touched some anger. I touched a lot of sadness. The next day, I did another full dose, and that was when I experienced an ego death. It felt passive. It felt like it was happening to me. I also got to work through some things I think that I had wanted to do and say when things were happening to me that I didn't have the ability to do and say at the time. I was able to say, no, stop, help, why? And I think those things were so true to what my experience was, but I didn't voice them. And that was freeing as well. Coming back into my body and seeing Victoria and feeling a woman, feeling held, it was a sense of mothering. I think Victoria stepped into that space for me and did for me what a mother should do. It was profoundly healing. I came back home and the PTSD symptoms were gone. I did good work. I really leaned into all of the integration work, because that's, I think doing the medicine is a big thing, but it's only the first big thing. The rest of it comes after. I really leaned into the process, and it started to kind of reorganize my nervous system. I didn't have that sense of threat all the time. I stopped having the adrenaline rushes and kind of the things that would come out of nowhere for me. They all went away. And I was sitting in such a better place. I was able to be much more responsive as opposed to reactive. Then I learned about Holly having, with Victoria, this retreat for sexual survivors. And I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And I thought, well, connection has always been something. I've always viewed myself as very separate, and as an avenue for self-protection, to be separate. This was my decision to step into connection. In going down there and meeting these women, I have never been more seen, more understood, more myself ever in my life. So that container, just sitting there with them, was amazing. Holly had wonderful sessions where we got to really sink into being seen, being vulnerable, being held. And that was something that I don't think I had ever accepted myself. But to look into the eyes of a woman who had suffered something similar to me and see acceptance opened things for me. My experience with the medicine was very powerful. We did one day where we did lower doses. And I had a moment where I kept saying the word yes. And what was going through my mind was all of the bad things I ever told about myself. And my answer was yes, yes, yes. And then I shifted into, I'm so happy. I accepted myself. I accepted the things that were done to me. I accepted my responses to what was done to me. I accepted whether I fought or I didn't, what I said and what I didn't. The next day we did full dose medicine. I sat down on the mat to do my medicine with this huge desire to feel non-dual love. I wanted to get there. I wanted the big, beautiful thing. And I looked at Victoria and we started to talk, and I knew there's something in between me and that. And this is my moment to work through it. And I said that to her, and she, in her wise and loving way, encouraged me and said that I was strong enough and brave enough to do that work. And I believed her. I took the full dose medicine, and this time I experienced another ego death, but I fought for it. It was not passive. Things were moving through and out of me that as it was moving through, I had choice. I felt like I had space. And I knew that as I continued to move through it, I was going to die. If this comes out, I'm going to die. And I let it happen. And I think one of the most amazing moments, and something that I hope, I pray, I never forget. When I landed back in my body and I opened my eyes, I saw those two women. And I remember looking at them saying, "What happened?" And they both said, "You did it." There's no words to describe what that was like for me. I feel like I was able to let go of the girl who suffered, and to have them join me in that space and have them be there with me and experience it with me, something I'll never forget. So the women there also held space for me. And there's a number of them that we talk very, very regularly. And there's this sense of validation and being able to communicate and connect with these women who not only experienced similar things, but saw mine and I saw theirs. And I think so much of what I've experienced is not even believing myself and worrying so much about if I will be believed, if I will be judged. They saw me. I saw them. We believe. And so it's something I've never experienced before, to be seen and believed and to hold that for someone else.
Wow. So incredibly, incredibly powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so grateful to hear your story. There's so much there, and to see you and to believe you and to witness you, not only in this story, but where you sit today. Just even sharing your story, I know, is such a powerful thing for other women to hear. And I think there is a journey in healing sexual trauma that many go on, which is not having memories, but then at some point having a body sense and truly not understanding what that is, maybe even moments of I'm crazy, and trying to put pieces together of something that doesn't make sense, especially. And Holly, you can talk to this a little bit too, just how our systems so brilliantly shut down the memory, shut down what happened to us, and stuff it in a place that isn't accessible for us to survive life. And that psychedelics often can be a way to get to this information. Before I have Holly talk about that, Deanne, I want to just ask you what it was like for you when your daughter told you what was happening.
We were walking home from school, and I went through waves as she's talking of the minimizing of, well, Grampy does things I don't like too, no worries. To, oh, could it be, how do I validate? Thankfully, someone in my life had experienced sexual trauma as a child and was not believed by their parent. And what they had told me in telling that story was that being believed would have changed everything for them. That came to mind immediately. And so my instinct was to believe her and to validate what she was saying, whether I knew if it was true or understood what was happening or not. And so that was such a gift for me to be able to just do that for her. And my parents, I have my oldest daughter severely disabled. My parents were my backbone. I was a single mother, and fairly isolated, fairly introverted person. And so my parents were my life. And in the span of a 5-minute walk home from school, everything exploded and my entire life changed. So it was, I'm not exactly sure how I made it through that with the grace that I did towards my daughter and being able to keep holding her forward, but I was able to do that.
What a gift for her. And then just briefly, what transpired with your mother or father after that? I'm just curious, because that's another phase of this, when there's a parent in the house that maybe did know or didn't know. And that even aspect, it doesn't just change your relationship with, this was your father, your primary caregiver, but also your mother.
Yes. I didn't speak to my father after the police were involved and everything. I did speak to my mother a couple of times. I have an older brother that I was very close with, and I spoke to him once. There was a lot of denial at the beginning. After my father was sent to prison, I had a conversation with my mother, and she was accusing me and having a very hard time with the fact that I allowed it to happen, in her perception that I allowed my father to go through that. And I expressed to her that my job is to take care of my daughter. My job is to protect her. And so my father and my relationship with him had nothing to do with it. And she said, I survived and made it through this. You made it through this. And Ireland will make it through this. And in that moment, I understood that she had known. My daughter had also said that my brother had walked in on my father abusing her and just turned around and walked out. So I believe that there was full awareness. I've not spoken to my brother at all, and very, very limited conversations with my mother at all. So I haven't confirmed any of that. But the relationship and the mothering side of things has been something that has really challenged me. I think her role and what I experienced, and more so what happened to my daughter, has been a huge challenge for me to move through.
Yeah. So. And Holly, so this trauma response that, children have of shutting down something so that the memory might not even be recorded or so suppressed that we're unable to get to it. Can you speak on that a little bit and how it shows up in sexual trauma?
Sure. Yeah, so there's a beautiful term I like for these. So we'll say suppressed memories, but unstoried trauma. I think unstoried trauma is a beautiful way to describe it because, yes, the body usually knows, but there's no implicit memory there, no working memory. So how our body takes care of this is usually through, there's 4 different channels. So there's the physical, the relational, the sexual, and the emotional. In one of the chapters of my books, it seems to be the most popular, not for great reasons, but people see themselves. It's called Uncovering Hidden Wounds. And I go through those 4 parameters and I list 15 to 20 symptoms in each of those 4 quadrants. So this is going to be insomnia. This is going to be vaginismus or dyspnea. So that's pain during sex. Night tremors, flashbacks, anger episodes, depression, anxiety, eating disorders. The list goes on and on and on. So when we have this unstoried trauma, we can't access the memories. Our body kicks in and says, hold on, wait a minute, I need to let you know something's wrong. Listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. And, the body will tap and then it will shove a little bit and then it will push us over. And I know for so many of us, we've had a health crisis in one of those 4 ways that's made us say, oh my gosh, something is going on here. There's something I need to look at more deeply. The only thing I want to add is you do not need to remember what happened to you to heal. So how I talk about remembering is not a cognitive function. It's a very somatic. So it's re-member. We remember ourselves into this newly fully formed, beautiful human.
Amazing. It can be confusing, Deanne. I'm curious if you found the time period where body sensations were coming up whether that was confusing to you.
After Ireland had told and we went through the process, I think for me, they knew there was a thing. But there was also part of me that didn't want to believe that was a thing. And so I did have, I had a lot of abdominal issues, a lot of abdominal pain, a lot of eating issues, but never said to myself anything that this could be related to anything that had happened to me. It was something to push through. It was something to conquer. And I know that I've gone through a significant amount of my life not believing that it had actually happened to me. Somehow knowing deeply inside that it had, but my brain saying, no, that's not you. You're fine. Everything is fine. Keep going. And so it was very confusing, and it was very frustrating to not find answers, to have chronic pain, go to a doctor, go to the emergency department and have them say, everything is fine. No, everything is not fine. But it was a very challenging and confusing time. And it even happened during therapy when I was with Holly. But it was really an enlightening time to be able to walk through having this, going and seeking medical advice and workups, and then have nothing come from it, and be able to walk through why that was happening and what that was very important for me in this process.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Unstoried traumas. Is that what you called it?
Mm-hmm.
And then you are in the process of holding this space now, for holding the container for the body to remember, to allow the emotions to be felt, the rage to come, the disbelief, all the layers that then one has to go through in the remembering process. So now let's talk about how 5-MeO DMT played the role as a tool for this healing. How did this idea of having a retreat specifically for sexual trauma even emerge?
I love that you use the word tool, because that's exactly what 5-MeO DMT is. And we see this incredible tool as the most powerful tool in the world for catharsis. And we've seen it time and time and time again. When I say catharsis, what we're seeing is countless people walking through the doors who've been suppressing and storing emotions and experiences in their bodies, and never having the space or the tool to allow everything to come up and out. And 5-MeO DMT is such an intelligent force that goes exactly where it needs to and allows this catharsis to come up in any way that that person specifically needs it. And so, we see so many different ways of catharsis with people. It's completely unique to the person and their experience and what they're carrying. One of the terms we use is Buddha sitter. So this would be somebody who lays completely still and they're laying relaxed in their experience. Maybe there's a few smiles or head nods. There's very dynamic experiencers. So these are people who, one of the most common things we see is vibration and shaking and tremors, where the body starts kind of moving at superhuman vibrations. It's really cool to see. But the body may start to flail and roll and toss and turn. Maybe they start going into cosmic swimming. Sometimes there's even vocalizing, where there may be screaming and yelling or even singing. And, there's really no limitations to what the body needs to express, again, depending on what the person is going through. But, when it comes to sexual trauma, some of the things that we've seen are amazing, absolutely incredible. I can speak to my own experience with this medicine and my sexual trauma. So I do have a background in sexual trauma, multiple different experiences. And my first rape happened to me when I was 13. And I think I did what a lot of sexual trauma survivors do and minimize it and say, because I froze, I could have done something about it, and it's my fault because I didn't. And so I stored the memory of that, thinking that it was my fault and never wanting to speak about it because I was ashamed or guilty that I did something wrong. And, 5-MeO DMT, I had a session with it where it took me straight back to the experience. And while I had worked with other medicines before and worked through some of the stuff around it, I had never had such a big experience like that with the trauma itself. So we usually, behind me there's a mat. Usually there's this big mat there that people lay on, and that mat transformed into the bed, the mattress that was in the room when I was raped. It was this dirty mattress with no sheet on it, and I remember just laying there with tears rolling down my face and just feeling frozen and just feeling terrible and internalizing all of that. And so in the experience, I went back to that. But instead of being in the frozen mode like I had been in the experience, I was able to release everything that I stored in that moment. All of this rage came up in me, and it was so wild because in my life, I had never before that experience been mad. And I thought that maybe I was just like a super peaceful person or something. And I don't know, people are like, don't you get mad? I'm like, no, like life is cool. I'm chill, you know? But in that experience, it was like this bottle cap came off and everything came out, this sacred rage that, you know, maybe from the outside it would have looked scary to people looking at it, but from my experience, it felt so primal and so liberating to feel all of it and to let it out. And it was like at the same moment reclaiming my power and my sovereignty. And so, you know, where this idea of this retreat came out, you know, I know both Holly and I have a background in sexual trauma, and for me, what I noticed in my work here at Tandava is I resonate most deeply when we're working with people who have sexual trauma, and I think it's obviously because, you know, that's where my wound is, and so there's a deep passion to work with people going through that, and having you know, access to such an amazing expert like Holly, why not? Let's do it.
You know, Victoria, that's interesting. My first experience with 5-MeO DMT, the medicine woman said, "Did you know how much rage you have?" I was like, "What? Me? Rage?" No, I had no idea. You know, it was my first psychedelic experience, and I had very much learned how to bypass. And I had such a high threshold for pain in my body, which I never really understood either. But it's interesting how, at the time anyway, but it's interesting how 5-MeO DMT has that release to a degree that can go right to something you're not even conscious of. And it seems to be such an energetic release in the body. And maybe it's working in ways we don't necessarily understand. Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so beyond our little human brains.
What were the benefits of 5-MeO DMT and bringing a group together, as Deanne said, of people that had the exact same trauma to be seen and known? And what would you say from your professional experience this did in helping this passage and healing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been so fascinating because, and I really feel like the medicine found me as it does with so many of us. But because within sexual trauma, I study the nervous system, 5-MeO was the perfect tool because, as you know, you're in and out pretty quickly compared to most psychedelic medicines. And I knew for me, and, you know, I used to think I had like a not great nervous system, a wimpy nervous system, but now I respect the heck out of my nervous system. But I know for me, when I first heard about 5-MeO, I was like, I can do this because I don't think my nervous system can tolerate not feeling in control for 6 hours. And for almost every single client I work with, I was like, they don't have nervous systems that can tolerate being on the edge of control for 1 hour, 2 hours, 6 hours. It's just not going to be good for them. And I know that in my bones clinically. So I think the short duration, so you're kind of in and out in 45 minutes. And when you're out, your feet are back on the ground. And that's what every survivor asked me. Like, I don't want to feel out of control. I said, when you're in it, you're going to have, you're going to need to relinquish certain aspects of control. But I promise when you come back, you are back and you're right here and it's short. So Deanne's last journey was like 12 minutes. in and out, which had some positives, and other ways she felt like she was plopped back on the earth and she's like, holy shit, what just happened? Um, the other aspect of 5-MeO that has been just so beautiful to witness, I don't think there's a more somatically based or somatically intuitive medicine than 5-MeO. It goes right where it needs to go. And the somatic expressions of the women that we got to witness was incredible. Just the different parts of their body that it went to and what got to be released. And then the container itself, I knew this was going to be powerful, but I had no idea the extent to which bringing, so there were 9 of us in total, 9 female survivors together in a space, and just seeing that beautiful, beautiful weaving and the intricate, deep connection that we all gave to each other. That may have been the most powerful. And as Deanne spoke to, that container is still very much intact.
Wow, so powerful. Yeah, just the community aspect, right? To be sharing this experience with other women who have been in the same place. It's like you bow to each of them and what they went through. And Holly, what you were talking about just then about kind of the recovery from sexual trauma, do you think, as far as you mentioned that 5-MeO DMT is this somatic medicine more than any other psychedelic, do you feel like it expedites the process of healing sexual trauma?
I do. And my only hesitation there is, I'm not saying it is the only thing that does that. I'm not saying you need to do that to recover. You don't need to do that to recover. But if this is a tool that calls to you, of course, we've seen really profound healing, but I never want to say there's one way to do anything, but it's just the release. I think this is what it is. If you can be brave enough to get yourself to Mexico, brave enough to get yourself on the mat, brave enough to take the medicine, brave enough to relinquish pleasure for 12 minutes to 45 minutes, I promise you, I can almost guarantee, and I think Deanne and Victoria would say the same, you will come out feeling better. It might not be immediate, but if you step into your integration work and really look at the processes that have been in the shadows, you will feel better.
For you, what was the experience of holding space for that many women with 5-MeO DMT in Mexico for deep, deep, deep healing?
Again, it was more beautiful than I ever could have predicted, and hard, because as the kind of the lead facilitator on the healing side, not on the medicine side, that was Victoria's role, and I was happy to stay in my lane. But it was a lot of work for 5 days straight. And as Deanne was saying, so I created a workshop every day, kind of going through different aspects of healing, where we would all come together and express and talk. But then, the whole container of the retreat, we had a lot of fun activities too. And the workshops that I created were sometimes more fun than serious. So we kind of got this wide range of experiences there. But yeah, being on the ground kind of 24/7 in this space, I've never experienced anything like it. And we're already planning the next one. So suffice it to say, I think it was powerful and effective.
So what were some of the other modalities and tools that were used during the retreat? We already have the community aspect of other women, other survivors, the medicine itself, the beautiful setting of Tandava, the medicine, Holly, of your background and psychotherapy around sexual trauma, and Victoria, your own experience, which then helped you even create a space like this. What other tools were there? Were there breath practice, yoga?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we used yoga, we used Wim Hof breath work, we used meditation, we had a sound bath, and we also had a traditional temazcal, or what's known as the sweat lodge. And it's placed, right after medicine experiences on the integration day we had it. It's another opportunity to allow what's processing to continue to process. And yeah, for anybody who's not familiar with with Sweat Lodge, it's a really, really beautiful indigenous practice, which, is basically like entering into the womb of the mother. And there's 4 doors where hot stones are coming in every time. And we're offering prayers, and we're connecting with the earth. We're connecting with the elements. We're connecting with community in such a deep way. It was such a beautiful experience to experience in community in that way. But also like the control aspects in there. It gets hot. It gets intense in there. And just like the medicine, there can be moments where it's like, nope, I'm out of here. It's too hot. I can't handle this. I don't have the capabilities in myself. Or we can allow into it and trust that we do have the strength to carry on, especially when we're surrounded by the other women in that space. We also used rapé and affirmations. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of amazing things sprinkled in there, for sure.
So all these incredible modalities and tools on top of 5-MeO DMT and the community. Deanne, what does your body feel like now? I know that sometimes after 5-MeO DMT, it is such a huge experience. And sometimes coming back to life is like, who am I? What is this? It can be untethering and beautiful. It's like everything. So I'm curious how you're doing today.
Thank you for asking and knowing that it can be a little unsettling. It is both beautiful and difficult all at the same time. I work in a space with people who are kind of teetering on the edge of life or death. And so I have found that being in that space is a little bit more challenging for me right now. I think it's a beautiful thing that F.I.V.E has opened up things for me spiritually, energetically. I definitely perceive my life, my world, the people in my world a little deeper, differently. And that has been an adjustment to really feel the humans around me very directly in my body. And then my work environment, being I work in critical care. And so being in a space with emotions that kind of peak and trough. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of grief, often anger, and so to feel that differently has been a little bit of an adjustment. And I would say physically, I feel lighter, which is these are all things that sometimes when I try to explain to people how I feel, I don't have the right words, and so but lighter is definitely a piece of it. And there is like the desire to find stability, and I'm trying very hard to let this play out as it will, and kind of lean into the curiosity side of things and allow things to be unsure and allow the ground to be unstable, knowing that in all of that I'm safe. And I think the dramatic change from prior to Mexico to immediately after doing the medicine is I have the ability to make that choice. I couldn't have made that choice before. I would have needed that stability, needed to anticipate things for my own safety. But the medicine shifted things, unlocked things, smoothed things. I'm not quite sure what the right word is, or maybe it's all of those words, so that I can have choice and I can say, this is what I want. This is where I'm headed. And I don't have to make a different choice because my body tells me I have to.
Pretty powerful. I think one of the other things I'm curious about, I know in my own experience with 5-MeO DMT, like I said, I think it's very typical of Western society, but trauma as well. It's shutting down the body. So we lose actually access to what is our kind of strong no, what is our yes. And then I remember after 5-MeO DMT, my body feeling so sensitive, like just like I could feel everything. And I think you were just hinting on that, like you could feel other people. But even my own system felt really raw for a while. And at first it felt really uncomfortable. And I thought, oh, should I have done this? And then there's kind of the deeper realization that, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel. This is actually what a body is supposed to feel like inside, like these sensations and all of these things helping me understand whether I'm in energy that feels good or not feels good. I'm curious if all of you have had that experience as well with 5-MeO DMT.
Certainly I have. When I came back, it was just, I mean, I was going to the dry cleaner and just in tears, but happy tears and listening to music. And then just the tears came, but just the non-duality. And I think, yeah, just that in sex therapy and in this work we do, I talk a lot about qualities of eroticism, which really translates to life force, vitality, imagination, co-creation. I felt all of that when I came back. And again, it wasn't all blissful. There were some scary moments too, but there was just this sense of, how Deanne started, like, I don't have to keep myself separate to be safe anymore.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I think that is more profound this time around. When I came back the first time, I did continue to isolate myself. And this time through choice, and because with work, I don't really have too much of a choice in this moment. I'm trying to really lean into the idea that that connection and this openness and this conduit for sensing things and people is a gift. And while it's a little uncomfortable, and I'm still navigating how to manage it, what it means, that it is, like you had said, where we're supposed to be, where our bodies are at when they're at home. And so I think that is, as someone who's braced constantly for my entire life, that contracted braced position, to be in a place where I'm now arms open, chest open, receiving is wildly new and both beautiful and scary, but not in a bad way scary. And I think that I have a not a bad way scary now, which that's
I like
also
it.
lovely. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think that's why it's so important after 5-MeO. One of the things that we talk to basically everybody that comes through is creating a landing for yourself on the other side of this. It is like we're a newborn baby. For so many of us after this experience, it's like we're very raw. We're feeling everything. It's all coming up. And it's so important for us to honor this moment. It's such a sacred moment. So much of our lives we're human doings and we're just pushing down everything that we're feeling and not being with it. And for us to have a moment that's so raw, for us to feel all of it, it's a good opportunity for us to reshape our lives, to pick and choose what's serving us and what's not serving us. And so, yeah, treating ourselves like a newborn baby, being mindful about what place we're landing back into. And it can be nice to, have a little bit of a buffering space on the other side. We always like to recommend that people wait at least 3 to 7 days if they can before getting back into their life stressors, and make sure they don't have huge lists of to-dos. And if there's, for example, any situations or people in our lives at that moment that cause us some pretty significant triggers, just setting some healthy boundaries in that moment. So yeah, I'm happy you brought this point up about how we can feel a lot afterwards, because it's a very natural part of the process.
So are you going to be doing another retreat similar?
We are. We've already landed on the dates. Victoria, I can look at them specifically, but I know it's in May 2024.
So exciting. And
Yeah, well,
how many people do you host for these retreats?
yeah, we'll be about 6 or 7. We like to keep it super small and intimate, especially with what we're going into is big work. So intimate is important.
And speaking of intimate, Holly, I think what you were just talking about is really fascinating, because there's the first level. Well, there's many, many, many levels of healing sexual trauma. First is coming out of the denial. Then it's like the body sensations and not even understanding does my mind not remember, but I'm having these wild memories within my body. But then with 5-MeO DMT, the energetics, the moving through of the motion and the trauma. But then beyond that is how to then create sexual health So this medicine, 5-MeO DMT, is this beautiful, creative life force energy that kind of goes to the very place in the body that we need, even when we ourselves don't even know we need it, and does this magical thing. And a lot of people, when there is sexual trauma, creative force can be shut down. How do you then move to the next level and stages of sexual healing to then be open once again to this kind of relationship and sexuality?
Yeah, it's and this is really like this is my life's work. Again, I am a trauma therapist in my heart, but it's kind of the what comes next that is very exciting to me, and I love to sit with people through. Um, so as we were saying, there was a workshop every day of the retreat, and we kind of moved through the stages. And on that last day, it was very much an eroticism workshop. But I just want to point out you can be at any space in your journey, be where you are. So there were definitely some survivors on this retreat that were towards the beginning of their trauma, and they hadn't really thought about their sexual template, desire, arousal. They certainly hadn't thought about fantasy. But with the different workshops, we were kind of able to weave those together and go as slow as you needed or as quickly as you needed. One fun thing we did on our meeting, so we held a meeting with all 9 of us 2 weeks after the retreat. I work with Dame Products. They're a sex toy maker, sexual wellness product maker, and they gifted us all vibrators. So I got to mail vibrators to everyone. So for all the survivors that want to step into that space. So really, I think as we go, we'll figure out where everyone is, and we can either have it super sexy and erotic, or we can be at the beginning of trauma or hit all the spaces in between.
Wow. So you have the unstoried traumas being told, and then you have the remembering of the bodies, and then the reclaiming of that sexuality. It seems like there's this amazing, beautiful healing retreat work that you are doing. It's amazing. I really just want to bow to all of you because I believe that this is one of the biggest traumas on the planet that, again, it's very silent. So, Deanne, again, I want to just thank you for coming and putting a voice and a face to something so awful. And, many, many, many blessings and prayers for your daughter. I'm curious if you would at some point encourage your daughter to do this work.
We do talk about it.
Yeah.
We talk about where she's at, what moves for her. She has a lot to work through. She has talked about 5-MeO and knows she's not ready, but also is open to when it calls to her. And I think that my hopes for my daughter is that she can get to that place where she has choice, where her body, her fears, her nervous system doesn't hijack choice from her. And I think that I see it, and I see it where I work. You can see unstoried trauma or trauma I don't know in people all of the time.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what I hope for everyone, that we can get to that place where we have choice again. And 5-MeO is such a tool to help you move through things that seem like gigantic mountains. How would I have climbed that mountain? I can't imagine. Thank goodness I don't have to.
Yeah. So I want to just open it up to the 3 of you and see if I missed anything that you'd like to share that we didn't touch on, or an important part of the retreat that is coming to your memory now.
I think I just wanted to say before, this was a completely female retreat. So even the sweat lodge was run by a female medicine woman. It was such a safe container. And of course, I know and work with plenty of male or non-binary survivors. So Victoria and I have also been talking about creating retreats down the road that are not just female survivors. But in the same breath, it was an incredibly safe container, and I think it was a perfect place for everyone who was there to really step into their work that might not have been possible had it been co-ed.
Holly, what do we know about the statistics on sexual trauma?
Yeah, so 1 out of every 4 women and 1 out of every 9 men, and 66% higher rates than that for non-binary identified people. I don't know. I think we all stepped out of this container after our 5-day journey, feeling really hopeful and feeling potential. I'm just so blown away by these. I mean, this was the first time. This is the first retreat ever of this kind, and these 7 women came together and were just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, brave. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm curious, and it's just because I know, just how trauma works, and we know the cycles of trauma. A lot of times the cycles in particular of sexual abuse or physical abuse, they just kind of repeat through generations. Do you know if any work is being done for individuals who have the propensity to be a sexual abuser but has not acted on it yet? Like, if we are going to heal this on the planet, it seems also that the perpetrators need some place to be healed and rehabilitated. I don't know. Is there anything like that being done yet?
No, I don't know anyone that's doing that work yet. Interestingly enough, we have had some individuals come through the center who have not disclosed that they have been perpetrators, and in the experience itself, finding the healing and making confession and making peace with it and forgiving themselves. So I definitely see how this molecule could be useful for that. But as of now, I don't know any spaces that are working into that. But that's a really beautiful idea.
Victoria, are you almost in your trainings with F.I.V.E? I know you're training a lot of facilitators. There's so much of this. Would you consider doing a specific training for people serving 5-MeO DMT with Holly to train other people to create a similar container in some way?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Our training demographic is actually a lot of clinicians, mental health professionals, physicians, and we like to ask through the training, through the beginning and then to the end, what demographics of people are you feeling called to serve? So absolutely, if there are some people that are stepping up who want to do this work, we know what to do. We got it, Holly.
Dude, yeah, me too. It would be wonderful.
And Deanne, would you see yourself going back again, or do you feel right now it's just you're good where you are and just reintegrating, or would you possibly go back a year from now?
I would go back. Actually, one of the things that came right after the medicine is that I desperately want to help women.
Yeah.
It was something that kind of landed on my chest as I was laying under a tree out, and I had just done the medicine, and it was profound. I have no idea what that looks like. That's part of the fun of it, I guess. But yes, going back to serve, going back to be a part, going back in any capacity is something that I feel very called to. That place is like a home to me, and these women are like sisters, mothers, Fred, they're all of the things, as are all of the women that sat there with us. We served so many roles for each other. And it's such a beautiful thing that I hope I can continue to somehow have that be a part of my life.
Well, it's interesting. You just said you just got this incredible kind of desire within to help other women, and you don't know what that looks like, but it's starting right here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Definitely feel emotion coming up.
Yeah.
For the bravery for you.
It's always been a very frightening thing to tell my story.
Yeah.
I think acknowledging that something happened to my daughter because I didn't remember, and being able to rewrite that as I survived, and my daughter will too, is such a challenge. It's been such a challenge. But things like going down to the retreat center and sitting with women, knowing I am not alone, knowing I am believed and I can believe changes everything. It just changes everything. And so I had to come here. I had to put my name on the thing. I had to let people see me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want women to feel like they have to hide. You don't have to hide. You are not alone. So thank you for the opportunity.
I think we'll end there. You don't have to hide. What a beautiful message, and that there is hope, and that there are tools, and sharing your story, I'm sure, is not only healing for the women healing, but also yourself. Just standing in a further honoring of your truth, the yes to all of it. And thank you for your yes, all of you. Holly, thank you for the work that you're doing. And Victoria, thank you for the work you're doing. I will definitely be coming to Tandava.
Yes.
For sure. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your story. And I would love to follow up, Deanne, with you and Holly and Victoria again as you continue this work. You're birthing something beautiful. And so would love to continue this conversation, and Deanne, as well with you, what emerges in your integration with 5-MeO DMT and how this healing journey continues. Definitely would love to have you back.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Michaela.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.